Good morning, and welcome to today's webcast, Supporting Your Real Estate at Every Stage. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome, and thank you for viewing our webcast series. Before we begin, please keep the following in mind. You can customize how you view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top right of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons that relate to a different aspect of our session. You can download a PDF of today's slides from the Slide Deck and Handouts widget. You can ask questions by typing in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. This presentation is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
With that, I'll turn it over to Stephen to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Steve Bacchetti. I'm a partner at Moss Adams, leading our construction advisory team. With me today, we have Jeff Needs and Isabella Risucci, and I'll pass it over to Jeff and Isabella to do a quick introduction.
All right. Hey, thanks, Steve. And thanks to everyone who is on the call. It's a great opportunity to get in front of our attendees. Some of them are clients, and it's just great to be able to discuss some of the things that we're actively doing today and things that I think have relevant questions given the real estate environment today. So with that, I'm director of our real estate advisory practice. I've been owner rep for over 30 years with large institutional real estate companies, and look forward to having a great conversation today about how we support clients' real estate. Isabella?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Isabella Risucci. I'm a senior manager with Moss. I'm super excited to be presenting today with Steve and Jeff. I work with them every day, all day. My background is in real estate, property management, specifically for commercial properties. I worked for CBRE and Hudson Pacific Properties, managing buildings in downtown San Francisco with big tenants, small tenants, office, retail, mixed use. I really want to highlight the Q&A function of the webcast. Please drop in your thoughts or questions. We really want to engage with you either during this presentation or after. I'll go ahead and pass things over to Steve to kick us off, and we'll see what we're talking about today.
Great, thank you. So today we'll be doing a quick practice overview. We'll be going through the real estate strategy, major capital project strategy, facility and property management strategy, and then benefits of a holistic strategy, kind of piecing all these various components together to provide one holistic solution for many of our clients, and or provide best practices from our experiences of dealing with this holistic approach. And as Isabella said, we're very interested in your Q&A. So throughout this program, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. If not, we'll plan on a follow-up with you directly. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Great. Hey, thanks, Steve. And this leads us to our first question of the day that we'd like to get some input in from the attendees. And the first question we have is, which of the following processes does your company manage? We're looking to, one option is construction. Do you manage real estate, property management, or you contract service procurement, combination of all the above, or none of the above? So please take some time and fill out the question, and we'll start from there.
We're about halfway there. Perfect. Okay, looks like there's a big combination of you guys out there, which is great.
Yeah, I think we're saying what we know about real estate, right? Everybody wears multiple hats. So it's the responses are giving more support to that what we face every day, everything. So I think with that, let's just highlight some of the outcomes of the survey. So we ended up with basically 40% of the audience click all of the above. Again, as we were talking, just supporting that concept that if you're in real estate, you're wearing multiple hats. So nice to get that feedback from everybody. So with that said, so our real estate and construction advisory practice, is really focused on helping our clients, make decisions, build strategy. We help them with a variety of services to inform their business decisions, right? There's a lot of capital that goes into real estate sometimes, and so we help them with some of these decisions. Construction, you need to buy or sell real estate. So we help our clients determine those strategies, and we can assist them throughout the life cycle of a real estate portfolio, whether you're building, buying, improving, operational. We've been very good at supporting leasing strategies and also selling assets. Our team includes construction project managers, project engineers, property and asset managers, real estate developers, construction auditors, accountants, internal auditors, process improvement, policy and procedure experts. Hopefully you'll see with that team, this is part of just bringing the whole holistic approach of all the different services that Moss Adams has to the disposal of our clients. And we've been very good at some creative solutions with our clients. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Isabella.
Thanks, Jeff. So like I said, I work with Jeff and I work with Steve all day, every day. And it's because Jeff just said, real estate and construction overlap, that you don't just finish one piece and then move on to the next. You're always circling back. It's extremely cyclical, whether you're, buying, selling, building, it sort of just goes round and round. And then there's obviously the operating. You've got budgets, you have capital improvement plans, you have just the day-to-day running of your buildings or your assets. And so we wanted to sort of highlight a couple of the services that our real estate team can specifically help you with, as well as construction, but then talk about how they overlap, because we have a lot of projects where we work together. So like Jeff said, we have a good mix. Our bench is deep. We have people from all different backgrounds of the real estate and construction world, and that's what really helps us promote that holistic view. We have our diverse teams. We can work through complicated projects with successful results. We've had people who have been the project managers running complicated projects. We have people who have been engineers on projects. So when we're looking at plans, or it's, oh, I've seen this before in an RFP, or I remember one time when I worked on this project, the construction, our contract just wasn't great. And so this is what you need to be looking for. And if one person on our team maybe doesn't have that background, we talk together as a team all day. We're on teams. Hey, can you weigh in on this? Can I get your insight? So we can lean on each other for our different backgrounds, just to kind of add another perspective of, hey, my client's talking about this, but I think you know a little bit more. Can you jump on a call? Let's talk about this. I want to really understand their issue. And then I think one of our biggest service offerings that's really a combination of all of these things is our CRM. For us, that's coordination, reporting, and monitoring. So we can help lead your projects, come together, do the meeting minutes, we like to say wrangling cats, or one of my coworker does, and I really love that. I've kind of taken it from her. For the reporting, it's whether that's a change order report or pay app reviews, or just, hey, this is where we're at. This is, where you're at in your expenses. This is where we're at in your overage. How much of your contingency have we used? Not every business or house has that capability in-house to keep track of those things. And so that's something that we can really offer. And then monitoring, bringing things to your attention when it needs to be, just sort of keeping things on track. And I think that that's a really great service offering that we have, because we're there in the beginning. We're there to help in the design phase. Do you need help with RFPs? Maybe you don't. Maybe you've got your RFP person. That's great, but maybe you need help with the project management piece. So I think Steve will speak to it more a little bit later, but just we can help at any point in the real estate cycle. But if you really needed someone to just kind of take you from A to Z, we have that capability.
Yeah, I think I would only add one thing to that, which is just simply that we find a lot of clients, a lot of times standing alone when they're working with architects, contractors, attorneys, and not strong enough representation on their own side. And I think that our clients that have worked with this really begin to value or our ability to maintain communications across all those service lines that we're working with to make sure that your strategy is being implemented. And that takes effort. It takes the experience of working with these types of teams. And we've done a really good job at Moss Adams with our experiences and our clients of really achieving some good results in this. So again, looking forward to the further conversation the rest of today or this morning.
Great. I think I'm going to lead us into our next poll. So we would love to know, for your business's real estate, whether you own it, whether you lease your spaces, if you have a small shop, but then you have a warehouse somewhere else, is your construction and your real estate, your property management, is that managed in-house or externally? Tell us about if you have a team or if it's something that you rely on outside vendors. It doesn't have to just be one shop. It could be, a few. Like maybe you've got, this is who I work with project management. This is who does my leases, that sort of thing. So we'll allow for a minute of that. We're almost there, just past halfway. Thank you for those that have responded. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and we'll see where our results have landed us. Okay. And I think that makes sense. I think that I know in my former line of work, I had a whole team, right? I was property management, but we still worked with outside counsel, or, sometimes if a project was really unique, we would bring in an outside project manager, even if we had our own, just because it was such a unique project that we really needed an expert. So I think a lot of that makes sense. Great. So Jeff, I think you're going to take us away and let us see how. There we go. It's okay. All right, I'll go ahead and advance it for you, Jeff. There we go.
Great. Yeah, you can see how Isabella already enjoys working with Steve and I all day long. It's real estate advisory, and people always ask, really what that is, and we've been successful in really doing a lot of broad engagements with our clients. So, it'd be nice to be able to say it was either construction management, contract reviews, focus more on the strategy side, but we're really just seeing across the board. And I think today in the real estate environment we're in, there just are a lot of questions, right? It seems like clients have, really today more questions than they have answers to, which is understandable. And so what we're going to do here is just kind of walk through some of these key components of the advisory side, and I think it'll be very applicable to what many on this call are discussing today internally. But basically our real estate advisory, we're focused on helping our clients develop and implement strategy so that their real estate is really complementary to their business goals and objectives, right? There's a lot of times where we're working with clients and there just isn't, they just, we've got all this real estate, but we don't really know what it is. We don't really know, we don't have a capital plan with it. We don't know what's coming next. because they haven't really gone through the process of developing that strategy. And real estate sometimes can be, kind of the behind the scenes of businesses, right? If you're medical clinics, you're focused on you're delivering your health programs, but you have to do that with inside real estate. And so the real estate takes a step back. And so that's why we come back in and we help build that strategy so that the team can move forward, with capital planning, with sites work well. We have to do we let some leases go and we go get new leases. So that's the diversity of things that we work with, and just wanted to kind of walk through that with everybody here real quick. So from the strategy perspective, in a lot of cases, like I was just saying, if you have your business isn't real estate, but you have a lot of real estate, or you are real estate, but you still are just kind of working day to day. So what we do is we come in and try to help build that strategy. We start with that first, right? It's our objective is making sure that our owners always have clear goals and objectives with what they're doing with their real estate. And so we come in and we start with assessing existing facilities and properties, try to understand that. At that same time, to try to help build that strategy, we're also making sure that we are getting from the client, what are their goals for the real estate? What are their objectives for those real estate, right? We're really trying to, in that strategy component, make sure we know what you have and make sure that your goals and objectives are fitting that. And we have to have those items as we start to help you build your strategy, right? And then the strategy, I have a sample after this that we'll walk through, kind of a real life sample. But your strategy, like we said, it could be just you need to, in order for real estate to support your business, you may need to have some assets you need to sell. We can help you work through that process. You may have some assets you want to go purchase. You may need to do site selections to find a new site. Or it may just be, listen, we've got this building, but it doesn't really work for us in its current configuration, and we need to remodel it, right? So we can help identify that. We can help if you are a landowner, how do we, or a property owner, how do you work through strategies right now that fit today? Because the environment out there is changing, and so do you have the proper strategy that helps you move forward as the property owner as well if it's investment property? So we take the time, we have the resources, the experience, and actually, and the connections, right? We know the broker world really well. We know the contractor world really well, architect. We have those relationships to bring to help us develop that strategy. And then, as we say, once you've got the strategy, then we've got to implement it. So, from the implementation stage, we're working through, as I was just saying, you need to identify the team that's going to help support the strategy. We need to find the resources, whatever those resources are that help define that strategy. Work with you to, work with an owner to get the contracts, the right contracts in place for you. We need to finalize the most important thing, right? At the end of this, in this implementation phase, we need to make sure we identify the schedule. We need to make sure we identify the budget. And then we also need to start if there's entitlements that need to happen, or if there are permits that need to get in place, we work through that as well. And then obviously there's the start and the finish of the project. So again, starting from that strategy side, working to the implementation side, we work with clients from one stage to the next. There's also times where we come in the middle of this, right? The client has the strategy in place, but now they need to implement it. So we also come in at that point and work with clients from the implementation stage forward. And so once we get through all that, right, then you have your operational phase. And we've had several clients that we're helping them identify, just through their current operations, where some efficiencies, do they have the right team in place? Do the teams have the right process controls in place? And we've got several clients there. We're working with them through this process of just making sure their operational is, they've got good eyesight on staffing. They've got good eyesight. They have the right vendors in place. We help them review. We've done several lease audits. We've done some contract service audits. So those things come in place kind of when you're in that operational mode. And so again, through the real estate advisory practice with Moss Adams, again, working with our clients through, again, let's make sure there's a strategy in place, right? That's really important to your real estate as it is in your general business. And then making sure that you've got the ability to implement that strategy is very important. And then if you're in that operational mode, we also have the experience and successes to help you through evaluating some of those things over there. So with that said, I'm going to share a slide on a building, and this is just a building that's out there. But when this became part of my portfolio in a prior life, at this point in time, great building. It was 100% leased. The owner had just been, basically collecting the cash flow every month, and everything was great. Well, the challenge is they had a debt. There was, their loan was maturing in the next 6 months. The city where the property was they rezoned the land, and so the current use, which was mostly office, wasn't fitting for the light industrial office or use that they had changed it to. So there was an entitlement issue we had to work through. The tenant, the largest tenant that occupied 80% of the building, was vacating within a short period of time. And the other thing is that space was not very reusable, right? So you weren't going to find a tenant that was going to take the space as it is. So, we had, and then on top of that, you had aging, the building had aged and hadn't been kept up. So there was things like that we had to fix as well. So to restate, there was a debt timing issue on this property. There was an issue with entitlements on this property. There was issues with vacating major tenants, so major work that needed to be done to re-tenant the building. And it needed a leasing program, right? Once you went through all that. So a lot of things that were floating out there. And after having conversations with the owner, part of their conversation was, listen, let's just get it back. Let's just give it back to the bank. And so I just, when working with them, I said, well, okay, well, that's an option, but let's go through and let's come up with another strategy that that you can look at and go from there. And so we did that, and we came back to them with a plan, and we had a budget and timing of how we would solve the entitlement. Went and found the right attorney to help us through the land use process there. We had found a good architect to help us come up with some new concepts of how we would what we would do the building. We went and found the right broker. We had one of the best brokerage teams helping us through this to help us understand the market. And so we went through all that. And then we also had a contractor that helped us price the different things that we were working on doing. And so we took that, and all that, basically that was a $13 million package of cost that we took to the owner. The owner came back and said, I think that makes sense. We took it to the bank. The bank agreed to it. And so we ended up getting approval for the strategy. And then we actually went through and implemented the strategy. And this was the outcome. We ended up extending the bank term. We ended up getting the bank to actually front the capital improvements. We spent a year doing the entitlement process. And you can see the transformation of the building. This was also a historic building. So all the glazing you see in there, that sash glazing, we had to replace all that in the building. We redid the front entrance, obviously. We had to redo the whole lobby inside that you don't see the picture of. And then we gutted all the floor plates inside because, as you can see, there's great lighting from these windows, but inside it was a little bit of a maze. And so we gutted that out. So now the space ended up having 3 sides of windows all the way through. So all that stuff was done. Again, a good example that we developed the right strategy. We had the right resources. We found that we had the right vendors to execute. We went and executed, and the end result was obviously the owners of real estate do what they do. They sold this and made 2x of the income they had into this property and of their investment, and was considered a win. So I'm sharing this with everybody to understand that the importance of the strategy, the ability to apply a lot of thought into that, and maybe thinking of maybe that strategy leads you to a different place than where you thought you were. and then providing the right resources to make sure that you can implement on that. So, we look at that, again, just sharing this as an example of that process of strategy implementation and how that has an end result on a property. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right. So I'll go over the project lifecycle that we handle within the major capital project advisory team. So as background, our team does everything from program management to construction audits, contract construction audits. In between those goalposts, we can do process reviews, we can do policy procedure development, we can do reporting. So depending on the need of the client, we assemble a team within our group to best serve whatever the objective is. So I'll go through the various stages, which include planning, programming, design, construction, completion, and closeout, and just maybe kind of walk through some of the services that we provide within those specific phases. So during the planning stages, we'll get involved with some clients that, for example, like a K through 14 school where they get a major bond program. They have no experience within construction, and now they have multi-million dollars or billions of dollars to spend, and they need kind of those good process and procedures up front. So that could be as establishing kind of the team to support the program. It could be policy procedure development, defining roles and responsibilities, and kind of making sure that they have the right mix of internal and external staff to support a successful capital program. In the programming stages, when you've kind of identified the needs and the wants for whatever the organization is trying to accomplish, generally it may be like a master plan. So we have some clients that they have a lot of construction going on. They're receiving, for example, a lot of grant funding from various sources with various scope needs. So it's really important to get a developed master plan with kind of the KPIs that are considered best practice, including budget, forecast, cash flow timing, funding source, schedule, et cetera, so that you can lock in that initial master plan so that you can track performance accordingly. Another one, which I noted a little bit earlier, is assessing the staffing model. So, for example, schools or hospitals, they may be the most brilliant people within their specific area of focus, but construction and real estate's a completely different skill set. So making sure that you have the right experience to execute the program, if not having kind of a combination of internal and external capabilities to ensure that you're having the right technical resources to execute the program. And I'll give an example. Like we had one instance where it was an organization that they had top tier lawyers and top tier kind of people within their specific area of focus. But when they were doing the construction contract, they were incorrectly signing up for insurance markups that were way in excess of kind of what we'd expect for example, like subguard insurance. So they had built into the construction contract markups way more than the retail value and included the wrong cost basis. So that mistake, that went through the contract administration process, didn't have the right experience, and it ended up being a very large issue that we were able to identify at the closeout, but we weren't there in the beginning. So making sure you have the right team up front, the right experience up front, can really mitigate some of these risks. Other issues when you're defining the program structure, making sure you got the right team, the right contract types for whatever the project is. So if it's a major capital project, we'd expect to see a guarantee maximum price contract, for example, with strong cost of work definitions. For maybe smaller projects, a lump sum or a T&M contract type would be the best need. So making sure that you have your total program, understanding the scope, and ensuring that you have the right contract type can prevent excessive charges to your organization. Next, for the design phase, we do both architectural contract reviews and construction reviews. When we do the architectural contract reviews, we're very focused on the procedural requirements in terms of as you're kind of working your way through schematic to design documents to construction documents, that you have the right people signing off on each of those phases. So we had one client that we got involved from the director of internal audit. Pre-construction was way over budget, and they engaged us to say, hey, what's going on? What ended up happening was the wrong people, they didn't have the right contractual controls or the roles and responsibilities defined. So when we went in and we're looking at the design process, the CEO kept changing the type of project they were building, but the consultants around them and the contractual provisions that were supporting that process weren't defining the cost justifications or schedule impacts to those changes. So as he was making those changes, architectural budget was increasing, pre-construction budget was increasing, but there was no cost schedule impact justification forms. So when we were in, that was kind of an easy win for us to say, hey, when you're changing scope, the team needs to be reporting to the appropriate parties, what is this impact to the schedule? What is this impact to the cost? So from that, they were able to get back on track and get it, the schedule and budget more formalized, so they had a better gauge of where they're going to land. Within construction, making sure that you are monitoring the progress through reporting, quality, making sure the material specifications are in line with what you are trying to build, and ensuring it's very clear what you're going to get at the end. We see many instances where clients will come to us saying, hey, did we get the Mercedes or Tesla, or did we get the Honda Civic? When you're in construction, that's not the time to be asking those questions. That's really within the pre-construction phase, where you want to have those material specifications well defined, so that when you get your finished product, it's in line with those specifications. As you change during construction, that's where change orders can occur, and that can, especially in today's environment, those material specification changes could result in significant schedule delays, for example, which will impact budget. Construction, auditing the contractor's cost. So this doesn't necessarily need to be a negative thing. Some of our biggest clients are contractors. So making sure that when you have the GMP contract, the cost of work definitions are well defined, and collaborating with contractors and owners on, hey, what's an allowable cost? What's not allowable cost? What provisions may be unclear? Because those unclear provisions can result in what we call the gray, which is not a good place for the contractor, owner, or anyone. From our experiences of just working through the audit process with both owners and contractors, both want a clean audit. They both want compliance. So having those discussions up front, maybe doing a smell check in the beginning stages of the payment application, saying, hey, where are some of the gray areas based off the cost of work definitions. Let's work as a team to figure out what a fair outcome is, so that when you get to the end of the project, the costs are compliant in line with expectations. Next, completion and closeout. Making sure that you do a final closeout audit before you're releasing retention is good. Making sure that you have good project closeout controls with kind of changing the ownership, and then transitioning to the operation. So when you get a building, there's generally warranty compliance requirements, making sure that those warranty compliance requirements are provided to the right party within the organization, and that you meet those requirements. We have seen instances where people get a brand new building, there's a 1-year warranty on HVAC systems, for example, and they're not meeting the warranty conditions. HVAC system goes down and they have to redo it. So in an environment, maybe like a public environment for state, local government, or a school, those costs are material, and you'll have to explain that to your stakeholders. So ensuring that you have a good project closeout is very critical. Next slide. Okay. So when do you do these types of assessments? So it depends on the need. So if we're talking like a new organization that's received a bunch of funding, I think early engagement is super important. Maybe performing kind of a risk readiness assessment, saying, do we got the team? Do we have the process? Do we have the policies? Do we have the contract types? Are we ready to execute on the construction program? If it's a construction audit, if you're in construction, I think doing an assessment early on is good. What I tell everyone is when you when you identify issues and they're small, everyone's very easy to discuss 50, $500 with. For some reason, if you wait to the end and the numbers are 500,000, the equation changes. So it's important to do early engagement work in collaboration with the project team, so that if there are issues, you identify them as soon as possible. You come up with an action plan, and then you execute the plan to mitigate those risks. And what do these assessments cover? It could be operations, it could be project delivery, charges, cost charges, and compliance. It can include schedule, scope controls, etc. And why would your organization want another auditor within the team? So we position ourselves as trusted business advisors. We're here to support your success. We are only successful when you're successful. So the benefits of engaging our team is you increase controls within your organization. You support cost management, cost compliance to the terms. You can increase stakeholder visibility. I think a lot of organizations, there's an audit committee or there's a board you need to report to. So having the ability to say, hey, we executed the construction program to budget, to spec, we communicated and reported at a regular basis, and we met our objective, is critical. So with that, I will pass it to Isabella.
Thanks, Steve. So I know we've talked a little bit about it. So my background is in property management. And so I wanted to take time today to sort of just walk you through some questions that I think are important for you to be asking yourself, as whether you lease properties or you own and operate properties. These are things that you should be keeping in mind. And if you haven't really thought about these things, or you're not sure how to really target them or move forward, or say, oh, like, how do I implement that for us? That's what we're here to help with. So first and foremost, I could scream from the rooftop all day about wanting to make sure that you're familiar with your core contracts. I'm talking about your big budget contracts for operating your buildings, your security, your janitorial, parking, and engineering. Without these support teams, no building would operate. When you walk into your building or wherever you work, you're probably good friends with your security guard or your day porter, right? They know your building well. I used to say that these support teams are really the people who run buildings. They kind of, so to speak, know where the bodies are buried at your building. They've worked there for a long time. And it's important that you value those relationships. You look at your account manager and you're looking at your contract. I think sometimes these contracts get set up and it's sort of set it and forget it, right? It's like, yep, I've got my guard, I've got my body, they're there, they're doing what they need to do. But contracts are usually very specific about the deliverables. And so, yes, is your security guard turning in a daily activity report every day? Are you opening that every now and then when it appears in your email, or the team or whoever's responsible for doing that, and actually clicking through the content and seeing that they are taking time to put in notes to, serve the building? Hey, I've noticed the same thing is happening every day at 7 o'clock. This is something that should be addressed. For janitorial, are they paying attention to what areas aren't being utilized as much? Should we, take certain spaces of the building offline? That was a big part of my job during COVID, was I had all these shared spaces that weren't being used, but they were still getting wiped down. But then my janitorial contact came to me and said, obviously I want your money, but I really shouldn't be taking it at this point. Let's come up with a better strategy so that way we can take that labor away from a space that's not even being used, and let's add on additional, cleaning of touch points and things like that. Or you have less people coming into your building. Maybe you don't need 3 trash sorters. Your contractors or your vendors should be bringing solutions to you. That might not be explicitly spelled out in your contracts, but that's one piece. And then it's also what is in your contracts. If you should be getting monthly reports, a quarterly sit down, at least an annual review, hold your vendors accountable to you. Make sure that whenever there's a price increase, you're just going back and finding that paragraph, or that you're familiar with it. And, you're not like, hey, I don't actually think that this is here. I remember when I started at my last building, I saw that for 3 years we paid for a service that was very clearly included in the contract that I had for elevator maintenance. And it's just because it was an old contract. It was a long contract. It was 7 years. And the people that made it, both the account manager and the manager, the property manager, they were just never worked. They worked there previously, and the people who were running the account and the property now were new, and no one really looked at it. And so I think it's important, if you haven't looked at those things recently, I would pull them up, just go over the scope of services. And if you feel like you need to add more, do an amendment. Or if next time you go out to RFP, if you feel like you need additional deliverables of, no, I want to meet with you monthly. This is something that I need to be able to run my business effectively. Put that in there as an expectation. Something that I see a lot for the property management side, we have a couple clients that we help. They're good at what they do. They're not a real estate company, but they're not great about tracking with their various landlords their tenant improvement allowances or their notice to extend their lease deadlines. And I think that oftentimes people have relied on things like Excel to track it. There's like a great tracker, right? And so it's like, okay, this is that date. But how often are people opening that Excel and keeping track of those things? So it could be as simple as just having a shared calendar where if you operate a lot of different sites, you put in those notice deadlines, reminders, or you can rely on another form of technology to send those pings. I would not entrust making sure that those balls don't drop into just one person, because anything could happen to that person. They leave, maybe it's on their calendar, but then once they're gone, all of a sudden you may not be aware of deadlines, and you could be at risk for missing something. And then you're at the will of the landlord to either, well, you missed your notice, and we actually don't want to extend your lease. And I'd like to think that that doesn't happen too often, but it's important that you eliminate that human error, right? Next, I think is sorry, I just want to double check something. One of my slides, there it is. Okay, sorry, my slide wasn't showing up correctly. Next, I think it's important that you're always analyzing your metrics. I think that as you operate your business or your real estate, you have a lot of software, right? There's accounting, you maybe have an access card system, maybe a work order system, and they're sort of there in the background to serve like one purpose. But it's important that you realize that you have all of this data available to you. So going back to that janitorial example, we were working with a client recently where they're saying, we analyzed our card swipes and we can see what properties and pieces of our properties are being utilized and what aren't being utilized. And so we're trying to come up with what that means for us. Do we need to maybe not lease these spaces anymore? Is there a way to, repurpose them so that they are serving our needs? Should I be, reducing my janitorial hours with the end result being a cost savings? For work orders, and this is more in specifically property management when you have tenants, right? Or maybe if you have different sites that often have work orders like leaky toilets and things like that. How often is that happening? If you realize that you're going out every 2 weeks to one particular site for the same issue, maybe HVAC, is it time to replace that, HVAC unit? Is it time to replace that heat pump? What's going on there? Because you're just going to keep spending money calling out a technician to kind of put a Band-Aid on it. And then that's when it gets into the larger discussion of, let's look at our capital plan. Like, how soon was that heat pump supposed to be replaced? Like, if it's in 10 years, but it's really supposed to last 20, maybe we need to have a conversation with the manufacturer or, our maintenance team, or is it being maintained, right? I know from my experience that my old building, my heat pumps needed to be serviced quarterly. And for the tenants that had heat pumps where they were responsible for it, they started to have issues. And the first question I ask is always, well, how often are you having it maintenance, right? You need to clean, the fan coils. You need to pull out the trays, things like that. So it's sort of paying attention to what these little tiny metrics could actually lead to larger issues that, should be addressed ahead of time. It can also help with even staffing. So if you have building engineers or journeymen or facility people that go out, how fast are they responding to work orders? You can set internal metrics as a company saying, if a work order comes in, we want it responded to within 2 hours. And if you realize that over the span of the year, your average is 4, maybe it's time to hire an additional journeyman, or at least you can start to ask those questions of what's going on, like why is this taking a while? And it can the smaller issues could start to bubble to the surface if you start to look at what your data is telling you and asking the right questions and having the right team in place to ask those questions. And I think that's part of why we have another poll question, and even the one prior, it's who is your team? Do you have an external team who's monitoring this? Is it one person who's doing everything? So maybe they don't have the ability to kind of drill down and ask these questions, but they're important because in the end, they can save you money, they can save you time. And, this is sort of the things that we want you to think about of, running your real estate effectively and efficiently. I think next is to just make sure that you're paying attention to your local industry news. I think BOMA, which is Building Owners and Managers Association, I was a part of for a really long time. IREM, the Institute of Real Estate Management. A lot of these organizations, you can pay to be members. You don't have to necessarily be a member. They have some free educational offerings. They have some that you pay for. But for BOMA specifically, and I say this as someone who's been on some of their committees before, they have a government affairs committee. And so their job is to go out and be into the news of what's going on. So they can come in and provide overviews of, hey, this new tax law is passing, or this new ordinance, right? Ordinances are very common in San Francisco, which is where my background is. So it's always wanting to get ahead of it, because if you know that every single building is going to need to comply with whatever ordinance it is, and you're going to need an architect's help, and there's a certain deadline, that every single building is going to be reaching out, trying to get ahead, trying to get those contracts signed, trying to, get it out of the way. So it's important to kind of go to these, just pay attention to those offerings, because then you could send someone from your team to kind of get the scoop, right? A big one for me that I felt like I was ahead of the game on was about being a large refuse generator with Recology for about waste. And so they were going to come out. Recology is this trash provider in San Francisco. And if you generated more than a certain amount of waste and it wasn't properly sorted, you were going to be fined. And so Recology did a good job, I think, getting the word out. And so all of these organizations basically put on presentations with Recology. And if you were there ahead of the game, you got to work with their representatives early to say, okay, well, what do I need? And I ended up being able to install and get ahead of the schedule for different size compactors based on my building's needs. There was no wait time. Basically, we got ahead of the game because we paid attention. We went to those seminars. Before then it became, oh, well, this is the compliance date. And then everybody was scrambling at the end. You don't want to be a part of that. And I think that for me, getting ahead of the game always comes from paying attention to what's happening in the industry. And I find that those sort of local chapters and organizations are always the ones that are ahead of the ball. Next, I think it's important just, be open to feedback. I think some of the best ideas that I've ever received for my building come from tenants or from support staff or from members of the public. I think it's important to, if you are open to it, maybe facilitate something like a Kingsley survey where you can say, what's going well at the building, what's not going well at the building. And, you might not always like what people say. It's great to hear, oh, every day security is just so wonderful and I feel so welcomed at the building. That's great feedback. If you see feedback like, well, when I walk in, I see security on their phone every day. That's something that you can then take back to your account manager. Or if people say, I really love sitting outside in the courtyard, down the street, there's a courtyard, they actually put out cornhole. Like, is that something that maybe you could do here? And that actually was a real comment that we got from a tenant one year. And then we ended up going above and beyond. We put out cornhole at lunch. We put out giant Connect 4, giant Jenga. We had some tech tenants. It was very popular, even though they had those things in their space as well. It was good to get outside and get some fresh air. It was something that we had our building engineers do, just put it out for 2 hours and bring it back in. And I really felt like it got people to pause stop by a retailer, get their lunch there, and then, enjoy, quick lunch outside. And it really brought some life to our courtyard. And then that led me to being able to say to my higher ups, hey, we have a lot more people in the courtyard. I think it's time for us to do a refresh. I think we should get some new furniture. I think we should get some movable furniture. And our courtyard ended up doing a renovation, and it really became a great space. We had exterior lighting. We were able to put in courtyard music. It ended up being a really great space based off of one comment from someone who just wanted to bring a little bit more of a community aspect, that they saw being successful down the street. And now we had that as well. And then last, and I'm sure you've heard this a bunch, is just remember to always be thinking about, it's a sustainability aspect. So increase your energy efficiency. Really easy swaps are swapping out your flushometers of all of your toilets or switching to LED lights. Sometimes there are retrofits. You want to be ahead of the game. Like, I know back in the day when solar was still pretty new, there were a lot of rebates that people were able to take advantage of. I don't think that one's particularly offered that often anymore for commercial real estate, but there are other offerings. LEDs had an offering for a while, so it's sort of like you can get ahead of the game on the actual improvement itself, and then in the long run, it can save you money. I think it's important just to, every kilowatt, therm, or gallon, saved is money saved. You can, for whatever your needs are. If you're going for LEED, Fitwell, BOMA 360, different building awards, all of those things help support that. But it's also, you should lease at our building because we care about these things. For whatever your internal needs are, also is great. And then it's also still helping the planet as well. But there are a lot of different, I should just say, energy efficiency aspects that you can be thinking about. And there are a lot of consultants that do that, but we also can support and talk to you about your needs and what you're looking to do and, what your all-in cost would be and then what your potential savings could be. So I think I spoke to the poll that was coming up. So I'll go ahead and pull that up. So wanting to just drill down a little bit more on how you manage your real estate and construction. So do you have a team? Are they internal or external, or is it really an individual? Like, do you have someone that's maybe a director of your facilities and they may have a couple people underneath them, but they're really the one that is driving and the person that's asking those questions about contracts, or someone that's in charge of those contracts or making decisions. So we'd love to hear from you. Give everyone a moment. Okay, we're about halfway there. Thank you to everyone who has responded. Okay, let's go ahead and we will look at the results. Okay, so various and then mostly team internal. That's great. All right, so we're close to the end. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the additional resources within the webcast. These should be available for download, or I think they link to our website. These are recent articles that Jeff, Steve, and I have worked on that kind of encapsulate everything that we've spoken about today. So please read them through. If something speaks to you, reach out. If you have a project that, or maybe you're not sure if you have a project, but you think you might just want to talk it through with someone from our team, whether it's specific to construction, specific to real estate, or maybe you don't really know, all three of us would be happy to just hop on a call and talk through what you have going on and seeing how we can help, or giving you a few things that you should think about as you continue in your planning process. With that, I think I'm going to pass it over back to Chad. I think we had a couple questions, Chad.
Yes, thank you, Isabella. Our first question that we had come in is, we're a regional financial institution looking to maintain our geographic footprint and to transition from large brick and mortar branches to smaller, more nimble, strategically located lease branches. What are some of the things we should think about?
Great question. As I look at that, I think some of this is going to be somewhat determined on, leases you may have in place, that you need to account for. But I think as you're looking for smaller places in better locations, the retail market is opening up and will provide you more opportunities than maybe what you've had before. So I think that landlords are going to become more creative about working with tenants like yourself as well. Whether it's structuring short-term things, just because, if you're trying out a new location, I think that you're going to find a receptive ownership. And given today's economics, I think that, if you're looking at doing that over multiple locations, again, I think the strategy is you got to figure out where your long-term commitments are, and are those ones that you can, if it is a lease space, there is such thing as negotiating early terminations with landlords that could be considered. If they're owned sites, you may be looking at how to support your, the capital requirement to move, to open up new stores, maybe selling some of those locations help to fund, those new stores. So I think there's a lot to unpack there because of the, trying to go from those larger brick and mortar sites to smaller ones. I think you'll find those options. I think the challenge is identifying what's the commitment you've got to those larger sites currently, and then just the timing of how you work through that process. Hope that helps a little bit answer your question.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. We have another question here. Can you help find buyers and structure a sell and short-term leaseback transaction?
So trying to find that, usually it's very common to find lease sellback transactions when you're doing a longer term lease. When you're mentioning in your question about short term, I think that starts to narrow down the pool of potential buyers, because you're taking that from an investment perspective. On a short term list, that's going to be hard to find a short term investor to do a lease back. But you may be successful in finding that if, for a couple of reasons. One, it may be a site that you've got that needs some time to be entitled and repurposed. So maybe that short-term lease back that you do allows for the buyer to come in and start to work on that strategy while he's still getting while they're still getting revenue coming in, right? The other thing is if it's an owner user, it could be another owner user that just likes the location, likes your building, and is willing to let you stay there for a period of time until they get their, until you get your term ended and they can actually plan for their occupancy of it. So there's a couple options that are there in terms of helping you find that person. I think that we would be best in helping you find the strategy and then finding the right brokerage team probably that would take that out to the market and find you the options. But I think you need to understand your options and the strategy before you go to that spot first. And again, hope that helps a little bit.
Great. And we're kind of running up to the top of the hour here. So I want to thank Steve, Isabella, and Jeff for a great presentation today. And if we didn't have time to answer your questions, we'll do our best to follow up with you after the webcast. Here's a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Thank you.